You will not believe some of the things that fans did to NBA players which got them to react. Every now and then, we see an NBA player get into a small argument with a fan who likes to trash talk. But sometimes we get to see instances where a fan doesn't know when to stop talking or how to control themselves on the court, and it results in the players reacting. Here are just a few of the many times where fans went a little too far and the players weren't having any of it. The first NBA player that wasn't going to just sit back and listen to this fan's trash talk was Kevin Durant. However, Durant wasn't just in an argument with any fan, he was arguing with none other than Drake. The Golden State Warriors were absolutely blowing out the Toronto Raptors with around 2 minutes left in the first half, and Drake, being a Raptors fan, decided to try and get into the Warriors players' heads to throw them off their game. Durant took his chance and walked straight over to Drake while he was shouting at him, and the two went back and forth for a little bit before returning to the game. Although the situation doesn't just end there. After the game, cameras saw Durant waiting in the hallway in his street clothes, accompanied by Klay Thompson, who was still in his jersey. The two sat there until Drake started walking down the hallway, and all three of them began shouting at one another while they walked past each other. Durant was saying things like, "See you in the Bay, Aubrey," while Drake stopped and began shouting back at the two of them before Draymond Green walked down the lane and started talking with both Durant and Thompson, splitting up the argument, well, at least for that game. The trash talk ensued in the next few games between the two teams, and that was to be expected. Drake would do anything to help his team win, and Durant is known to clap back at fans who he thinks disrespects him. The same goes for this next NBA player named LeBron James. You may have heard of him before. Back when the King was on the Cleveland Cavaliers at the beginning of his career, his team found themselves in a heated battle against the Toronto Raptors. I guess the Raptors fans like to trash talk. But anyways, this game took place while Chris Bosh was on the Raptors, far before he joined James and Dwayne Wade on the Miami Heat to win a few championships. While the two of them never truly spoke to one another throughout the entire game, Bosh's girlfriend had a whole lot to shout at James during the course of the game. Cameras constantly caught her yelling and pointing at James, though not many people know what she was actually saying. James didn't respond at first and instead let his play do the talking for him. He started rallying his team and making big play after big play, and then decided to say something short and simple towards her. All he said to her was, "This is your fault. This is your fault." James just exploded in the fourth quarter of that game as well and shut her up for good, scoring or assisting on every single field goal during the final stretch in order to help his team make a huge comeback and steal a victory from Toronto. Bosh's girlfriend may have been thinking that she was getting in his head and throwing him off, but now she may very well be the one to blame for the Raptors losing that game that they were leading by so much early on. Unlike in this next game between the Warriors and the Milwaukee Bucks, the two teams were locked in an 88-86 ballgame with about 6 minutes remaining in the fourth quarter. Thompson had drove to the rim and attempted to make a layup before getting fouled hard and hitting the floor. He had a few teammates rush over to give him a hand up, but right before he stood back up, he apparently heard something from a fan that wasn't okay. He immediately flicked his head around and started arguing back with the fan, and soon after he had multiple teammates screaming back at the guy for saying whatever it was that he said. Whether it was a racist or personal remark, it was something that you just don't say to anybody. All that was audible from the scuffle was one of the Warriors players telling the fan to watch his mouth. Soon after Klay started walking away, Draymond Green and the other Warriors teammates were talking to the referee to get the man escorted out for what he said to Klay. There were multiple security members trying to pick out the man that the players were fighting with, and he was soon enough escorted out of the stadium for his actions. This was followed by a ton of boos from the other fans in the arena and a sigh of relief for the players that had to deal with his actions. It will never make sense to me that a fan would spend so much money for front row seats only to yell hurtful and terrible things to the players who are just trying to enjoy the game that they love. I mean, seriously, they are people just like everybody else and don't deserve the hate that they get. Similar to how Russell Westbrook faces more confrontation with fans than almost any other player in the NBA right now, including this one incident in Salt Lake City while the Oklahoma City Thunder played the Utah Jazz. At this point in time, Westbrook was exiting the floor and making his way towards the locker room with a number of security guards around him. While he was walking off, upset and angry, a fan was shouting at him and pointing a phone maybe 3 inches or less away from his face. Now, I don't know about you guys, but if I was furious over a loss or argument and a man shoves his phone in my face while recording me and yelling at me, I'm going to clap back at them. This was exactly what Westbrook chose to do. He slapped the phone that the man was holding, and the two got into an argument with one another while security stepped in and tried to make sure the incident didn't escalate any further. The woman to the man's side was appalled at what she just saw, as if she didn't even see the man stick a phone in his face while screaming at him. It was honestly impressive how held back he was, despite his team just being eliminated from the playoffs for yet another year. That wasn't the only situation between Westbrook and a Utah Jazz fan either, as the infamous screaming match between him and one fan in the stands was by far the worst confrontation. Russ was yelling that he would mess up both him and his wife, while the man yelled racist and horrible things back to Westbrook, then acted as if nothing had ever happened and that the confrontation was all in good fun. But guess what? Westbrook was in another altercation with a fan, and this time it resulted in physical confrontation. The Thunder had just lost a playoff game, and Westbrook was holding on to the ball still. He was upset with himself just like any other player would be, and he was about to make his way off the court and into the locker room. That was until a random man sprinted onto the court and bumped into Westbrook, screaming right in his face that his team won and the Thunder lost. Westbrook was not only startled by the guy running up to him, but he was also angry that he got so close. He instinctively shoved the fan as hard as he could to try and get some space between the two, before security stepped in and settled the issue from there. The NBA needs to continue to stop these fans from taking advantage of their front row seats, and there should apparently be security on standby at all times whenever Russell Westbrook is in town. You never know what terrible things a fan will yell at him. Finally, I thought it was only right to end this video with the Malice at the Palace incident that occurred in a game between the Indiana Pacers and the Detroit Pistons. At first, members of both teams were involved in a heated fight on the court with each other, and punches and words were thrown around in the middle of the scuffle. It took a ton of teammates, coaches, and officials in order to break up the whole fight and try to calm them down a small bit. By the time that they finally got a few of them to cool off, the commentators started going into detail about what types of punishments were going to be handed out to the players for the fight. Some were expected to get ejected, while others were just going to get one technical foul but remain in the ballgame. That was until something unexpected happened. Ron Artest and Steven Jackson heard something that they didn't want to hear in the stands while they were trying to calm themselves down. And it resulted in each of them sprinting up the stands and literally fighting the people that yelled at them. By the time the cameras cut over to what was happening, you could see fans throwing their popcorn and drinks at the players in the stands, while simultaneously seeing another Pacers player throw a mean right hook and connect with a fan's jaw. Not long after that, you could see a few Pistons jerseys in the stands, although they weren't fighting but rather trying to break everything up, along with the multiple security guards that were doing everything in their power to slow them down. As soon as all the Pacers players were rallied together and being held on the court to try and get everything to settle down, one fan made his way onto the court and was trying to continue his fight against one of the players before being grabbed away by security to try and establish some type of order in the stadium. Then bottles and other drinks were being thrown onto the court at the players in what was one of the worst confrontations between fans and NBA players that has ever happened. It doesn't seem like anything will ever top this situation anytime soon, that's for sure. Thank you all so much for watching, and be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Check out the terrifying times that NBA players actually fight fans up next.